Good morning, everybody. Welcome to Journal House, or as I like to think of it, the Wall Street Journal's wind tunnel. It's a blustery morning, but it'll be an easy breezy conversation, I think. Pardon the puns, you like it. I'm Willem Marks, I'm a commercial editor at the Wall Street Journal Barron's Group, and I'm very happy to have such a qualified group of people to talk about a topic that is both very interesting and, to my mind, super important, not least for my own employment prospects as someone employed by the media. We're talking about the superpower of ad spend and its role in supporting quality media. And I'm joined up here by Lisa Utzschneider next to me, who's the CEO of Integral Ad Science, by Samir Amin, who is the Global Director for Data-Driven Marketing and Media at Reckitt. Next to him is Blake Chandley, who's the President of Global Business Solutions at TikTok. And on the far side is Shannon Reed, who's the Senior Vice President and Head of Media at L'Oreal. So they come at this from different perspectives, all of them I'm hoping very interesting. I'm going to get right into it though with you, Samir and Shannon, if that's okay, starting at the start of the ad spend journey. Shannon, let me ask you this. How different is the market you're playing in today in 2023 compared to 5, 10, 20 years ago?
Well, 20 years ago, digital was the new kid on the block, right? We had just really started 20 years ago getting in. Can you hear me? Is this okay? Okay, thank you. Thank you, Seth. 20 years ago, the digital was the new kid on the block, and we were just starting to figure this all out. Fast forward today, it's 60, 70, 80% of any marketer spend today. I think at the very early start of it, we started with the promise of every impression was going to be trackable, and we would know that this banner drove to this click that drove to this conversion with this person. And then things like the click-through rate died, and fraudsters are going to fraud, and you end up with an ecosystem that feels challenged a bit by the ability to be able to get to proper impressions and understanding exactly what you're buying and what you're doing. So it's progressed dramatically, but I think in some really interesting ways, and I think we have a lot of very positive future outlook on how we're going to keep this industry moving in a positive direction. I'll leave it at there because I know you're going in other places.
Sam, for you, how much more useful is the data available to you now compared to, say, a decade ago? And how have you used that data when it comes to your own spending strategies across various platforms in this transition from analog to digital?
So we before used to use digital as an extension of our TV strategy. And what that ended up meaning was we played by TV's rules. So we had target audiences were very demographic focused. We had a very big focus on price because that's how we used TV. We would always try and get the lowest, cheapest common denominator on price. Now, the difference in TV, when you buy cheap inventory, what you get is an older profile, down market profile, and high frequency. What you get when you apply that principles on digital and the data, you get low viewability, you get fraud, you get brand safe environments. So the data that we managed to get after investing in verification, we realized that we were wasting so much money in cheap inventory that didn't really drive any brand benefits. So that's when we had to rechange and reframe the role of digital as well from being extension to TV to having its own strategy and try and focus on the things that TV can't do. So TV is very good at one message to millions. Digital strength is allowing me to segment my audiences and talk to relevant audiences in a more relevant and a more meaningful way. And that's how we use the data to do that, to segment, to drive better consistency in messaging and activating using the best principles that we have on per channel.
And Lisa, one thing about TV was there were only so many networks out there. Today, there's thousands, millions of content creators. And I wonder, do you think that actually makes it more complicated because it's difficult to figure out where you want to place your work? Or because it's not actually that fragmented when you start looking at the number of platforms out there, in some ways it's easier to figure out where your eyeballs are, where the attention is?
Sure. So, can everyone hear me? Yeah. So I would say that it's complicated, yet it creates greater opportunity. And especially when you look at the current landscape in the digital ecosystem and the strength of the social platforms where the content is created by creators, it's highly dynamic, it's user-generated content, And also, it's a lot of video. And marketers, they want to go where the users are. And users, when you look at even the last 18 to 24 months, the explosive growth of the social platforms and streaming content. And I know in my house, my kids, they don't even know what linear TV is. They don't know what cutting the cord is. They just want to view it when they want to view it. On the device they want to view it. So I just see tremendous opportunity for marketers to be able to connect with users wherever they are, but also ensure that there's the right technology to help marketers navigate this new dynamic landscape and ensure that the environment is brand safe and brand suitable.
You mentioned video. Conveniently, we have someone who works for a platform that does quite a bit of video. Blake, when she talks about the idea of connecting marketers with users, that makes my brain boggle. I can't really figure out what that looks like in your space. And so at a place like TikTok, how difficult is that just day to day, trying to figure out where marketers can come, what they're going to work with, how they're going to identify what works for them?
Yeah, I think it's a good question. I would argue there's two sides to this coin. There's the science of like targeting, identities, signals, and all the things that actually the industry has gotten pretty good at scale, right? So identifying who the right consumer is, where they're spending their time, the kinds of things they're interested in, what they're buying. These are all just kind of signals and density, and that's been built up over decades now, right? And then there's the other side of it, which is how you engage from a creative perspective, which obviously in CAM we're spending a lot of time talking about. And a few years ago, it definitely was text and image based, predominantly. At least that was driven by the platforms that were available at that time. Of late, fortunately, TikTok's part of this. There's been a migration towards video, which creates lots of opportunity around the emotional side of things and the creative side of it. It creates complexity around how do you identify, how do you label this content, which probably is. We're still exploring that. I mean, I think that we're as a company, as a platform, we're 3 years into this, and the bigger players now have come in with short form video and with entertainment platforms to compete in this space as well. And so I think we're seeing the early on the video side of it, the early kind of work going against how do you target, how do you make sure you have adjacency that you want to be next to, how do you manage community safety, how do you manage brand safety. These are all things that we all think about literally 24/7.
One quick follow-up for you there. This all sounds like a mammoth task, right? So how much of that are you able to do so early in your corporate journey internally versus how much you're relying on external partners to help you as you figure that out?
Yeah, so if we think about it in two different ways, you've got the higher principle of community safety. Right, so content that's loaded up on the TikTok platform, is that content, does it follow community guidelines? There's lots of machine learning and moderation capabilities go into that, not only with our short form, but our live stream platform, which is a massive live streaming ecosystem as well. And there are enormous complexities with that. It's one thing around doing an image and text, which I think the industry's gotten pretty good at. That actually the processing power required to that is not as great as it used to be. Video is different. So audio, video is a more sophisticated need set. So that community safety, I think, we've done a good job as an industry and as a company, and we're continuing to invest there. And we can read a lot about in our trust and safety areas. And then there's around the next, which is brand safety. Right, so the brand safety is making sure that brands feel comfortable. Because one piece of content that might be relevant for Reckitt, L'Oreal might say that's not a piece of content that I'm comfortable being adjacent to, and that varies. That sensitivity, if you will, varies based on marketers. What their objectives are of a campaign. Is it branding versus performance? And so we have to build kind of first party and third party ecosystems, which we've relied heavily on in order to make sure that our brands are comfortable, that we're not grading our own homework, and that when an image, when an impression is served, that they're comfortable where that impression was served at a high, 97, 98% of.
Shannon, when you're thinking about where you want your brand to appear for consumers, how do you weigh up? Where do you find the balance between brand safety that Blake's talking about and ultimately return on investment?
Yeah, so I'll start with, before I get to brand safety, let me start with consumer safety, right? At the very forefront of it is the people that we are trying to reach. We will put consumer and person safety and their data safety first and foremost before we do anything else. And that is paramount to everything that we purchase. From there, we then go to brand safety. And so by creating that first lens, it gives us a very clear look at the data that we're putting into market, the data that our partners are putting into market, how they're using that data, how our data is intermingling, and whether or not we feel like the consumer's data is safe in that process and that we're reaching them in authentic ways that not just achieve the letter of the law, whether it's GDPR or all of the state laws that we have in the United States, but even a level higher, right? Move to that to brand safety, and of course, brand safety is paramount. We've a 150-year-old business. We've built some incredible brands, and we intend to continue to build incredible brands in the marketplace. We want to maintain the quality and integrity of these brands as we put them into the market. To Blake's point, the measurement piece is really important, and to me, and this is where he was going with this, it's the third-party measurement, because that's what's going to give it, to your point of not grading your own homework, thank you, as a reminder, we don't want our partners grading their own homework. We want to make sure that we have a third party who is stepping in and saying, yes, trust and verify that this information is correct and that you've actually reached the appropriate consumer. All of this can, and sometimes does, lead to more expensive, difficult to reach, fewer targeting, fewer capabilities of getting to the volume that you're trying to get to. I see those as good things. And yes, while they might be a challenge in driving a better return on ad spend, or at least perceptually might be harder to drive a return on ad spend, in reality, quite often they are driving a better return on ad spend because the quality of the impression that we're putting into the marketplace and the quality of the content that it is surrounding and supporting is actually increased and more valuable to the consumer, and they're in a more receptive place to actually receive that ad.
And Sam, to that exact point, when you're talking to your brand managers at Reckitt, how easy is that argument to make around, look, go for this quality media, you'll have higher CPMs, but long term, the return on investment is going to be better for you?
So I totally agree. We've tried to frame our media strategy into a responsible media strategy underpinned by 4 pillars, right? One of them is making sure we have transparency and equitable supply chain. We then look at how do we drive the right attention. So when we advertise, we want to make sure that the consumers can really understand our ads. Then it's making sure we have a responsible data strategy in how we acquire, activate, and store consumer data. And then we look at how this impacts sustainability. We want to reduce our carbon emissions. All that is underpinned by brand suitability and safety. That, when you start looking at the types of inventory, suddenly it starts to shrink. And therefore, prices go up. So what we believe is that actually good ROI is a prerequisite of what we have to deliver, and we will deliver that by doing these. If you start compromising on any of these 4 pillars, you might have cheaper CPMs, but your ROI, your returns aren't going to be as high. And we've got the measurement in place now to start to testing these hypotheses to say that, and if it doesn't work and the ROIs don't get there, we'll interrogate it. It doesn't mean we're going to go back to cheap CPMs. We'll try and figure out what is the right balance of quality and cost to drive ROIs. And that's what we're really excited about in terms of the data available to us now.
Lisa, something Shannon said to me when we were chatting the other day that I found really interesting, but in hindsight makes total sense, was if a consumer comes to a product in the kind of, quote, right frame of mind, the conversion rate is going to be better. And whether that's a piece of music they're excited by, a movie or a TV show they find entertaining, a witty newspaper column, whatever it might be, what are the mechanics that allow you to try and help that happen?
Sure, happy to answer that. So we've done quite a bit of research looking at the correlation between consumers' affinity to a brand when the brand's adjacency to the type of content, the quality of the content. And what we found is that 74% of consumers deeply care about higher quality content and adjacency to the brand and a brand affinity. And IAS, we've been a media quality leader for over a decade, verifying Was the ad viewed by a human, not a bot? Brand safety, brand suitability. But what's incredibly exciting about our technology now, that's backed by AI ML, is we're now classifying live feed content in the social platforms. We have a strategic partnership with TikTok, also with YouTube, where we can classify frame by frame video, image, audio, text. We can classify and identify objects, brands, celebrities. So in addition to looking at adjacency of the content and the brand, we can classify the quality of the actual content and identify what content is brand safe, brand suitable, what is inappropriate for brands, and ensuring it's according to industry taxonomy. So this opens up a whole new opportunity for marketers to ensure where they want to dial up their branding and ensure they're adjacent to content, but also providing incredibly rich data to the brands of in that dynamic live feed. So the technology is amazing. We've actually leveraged OpenAI over the last month, which has accelerated our product roadmap. And we can now offer this technology in over 90 languages worldwide.
And Blake, when you're thinking about TikTok, you often think about creativity, fun, joy. I don't want to be too positive, but I feel like that's true, right? And so when you're given those kind of opportunities to perform that type of taxonomy, as Lisa described it, how useful is that for you as a business?
Yeah, one, as a great spokesperson, thank you for inspiring creativity and bringing joy. Listen, I think that we're pretty early in our journey around this, and we're trying to, as an industry, figure out what it all means. I think the definition of the kind of content is changing, right? And so, as marketers, we spend a lot of time working with different teams saying, what worked 5 years ago, 6, 7 years ago in terms of identifying users and the kind of content and the things they're interested in might have changed, right? This concept of user-generated content, which, kind of has it's been around for 20 years now, right? So we still talk about it like it's different, but now users are consuming content very differently on our platform, at least. I can't speak for everybody else. And so as we think around taxonomy underneath that, there's lots of different ways to look at that, right? And there's lots of different ways to cut that and to identify and to target and to measure. And so, we just want to work really closely with the industry. So we're all trying to learn together. And so there are amazing industry bodies like GARM and others that we work really, really closely with to make sure that we're aligned with where we all want to go versus us going off and doing our own thing, which then it's kind of like if one player does it, it gets messy if everybody's not aligned together. So as an industry, we're trying to figure a lot of this stuff out.
And Shannon, I love the idea of kind of brands like L'Oreal supporting quality media like the Wall Street Journal. And this is almost a philosophical question. How does that, in your view, feed into creating a better quality media ecosystem overall, do you think?
Well, we talked a little bit, Blake talked a little bit, I think, earlier about the supply chain. And I think we have a lot of, I know, we have a lot of concentration on making sure that the dollars that we spend in media ultimately make it to the creators. And we know that there's challenges right now in the supply chain. And we want to spend some time and some effort with partners like the IAS and others, both from a sustainability perspective and from a quality perspective, making sure that we clean up that supply chain and we ultimately get more of the dollars into the hands of companies like the Wall Street Journal so that we can pay your salary, right? And not just us, obviously, but we want quality journalism. We want quality creative. We want quality creators. And when I think even about the partners like TikTok and user-generated content, we've been having a debate internally and I think in the industry about what does quality content mean. And it's an interesting debate to have because there's a natural assumption that if it's scripted, go to television for a second, if it's scripted, then therefore it is quality. That doesn't necessarily mean the definition. Lisa and I were talking a little bit about our children. I've got a 16-year-old daughter. She doesn't care if it's scripted. She cares if it's a creator that she cares about. So it could still be Michaela, who's one of our beauty influencers, who's phenomenal. Michaela has her own production capabilities. She is doing a phenomenal job putting out what she puts out on a regular basis. From my daughter's perspective and the eyes of Michaela's followers, she is quality content because she is delivering a service back to them as a consumer on the other side, and we want to make sure that we support that. So I think there's an incredible space for us to redefine what it means for content to be quality and for us to clean up the supply chain to make sure that the dollars that we're spending get to the end creator faster and more completely.
And Sam, question for you. We're talking about quality here, but how do you talk about values? When you're thinking about who to work with, whether it's platforms or publishers, how do you decide on those partners that share your values as a business?
Yeah, so it's a good question. So we created our company compass a few years ago to really determine how our employees should be behaving both internally and externally. What we did, we used that to anchor our individual brand strategies and brand suitability strategies. So what we used to have before was a Reckitt exclusion and inclusion list. And what that meant was the likes of Durex, which is a sexual well-being product, was excluded for sexual content because it was lumped in with baby milk formula, Nurofen, which is a painkiller. So, and it already has limitations in the types of distribution it can get. So applying those filters generically to Reckitt was most probably not the smartest thing we or our agencies did. So what we ended up doing was having bespoke brand strategies. So Nurofen will basically have its own strategy versus Lysol versus Finish versus Durex. That would be like then given to the markets. So even within regions, they will differentiate. Like the Middle East for Durex would be a lot more conservative than the US or Americas or Europe. So that really helped us really go to our partners to say, this is what we want, and these are the types of inventory we're comfortable being around. Previously, the marketing teams were reliant on the media team. They always thought it was a media team's problem to solve. It was our verification partners' problem to solve. It was the platform's problem to solve. And they weren't really engaged with it. And I think by doing this, we opened up a lot more inventory, which was a good thing in terms of cost, but it also gave them a safeguard knowing where their content is likely to appear and versus not. And I think that was a really massive step in the brand teams understanding the importance of brand safety and suitability.
Can I add to that? So there's also some of the things that we as publishers, and I can speak to TikTok, I can't speak to some of the other players, is we're also now aligning ourselves and partnering with the big media companies, right? And so the question is, as users are spending more and more time on these platforms, can we bring some of the content that they might historically have had to go into the Wall Street Journal or into one of the Warner properties or wherever, and bring that content into our world and create an environment where that content's consumed inside TikTok, and then brands run alongside it. And we productize this, a product called Pulse, right? And then there's a rev share with the with the publisher. And so we're testing a lot of different things to say what's the right mix so that we give brands the confidence that they can run alongside content that they're really comfortable with. It's premium content. It's priced differently. Publishers get the benefit of their content being consumed and the revenue associated with that. Right? So we try to create win-win-win. And then our users are discovering content which they might not have found if otherwise above the wind.
Lisa, on this windy rooftop, Lisa, I'm sure there's a lot of people here who are kind of interested in hearing about the role of AI and machine learning in what you do. There are going to be pros and cons we're all going to confront down the road, already are confronting in some cases. You sit between brands and platforms and publishers. How does it inform the work you're doing right now?
Sure. So AI ML is in our DNA as a company. Science is in the name of Integral Ad Science. And as Blake said, actually, we're early in the journey. So it's very early days in terms of brands and brand strategy around media quality and brand safety and brand suitability. And bringing together the unpredictable nature of social platforms, dynamic content, traditional publishers, and AI ML sits in the middle of it. And I think that as long as all of the players acknowledge this is an early journey, we're learning as we go, the technology is moving very fast and getting smarter very quickly. But again, it's early days. So if you look at things like misinformation, upcoming elections for 2024, hearing from marketers, speaking with IAS about, can you help with misinformation, help with things like tonality, right? Tonality of political affiliation. That's a really difficult technical problem, right? Or deep fakes. That's another area where, well, our feedback is, okay, it's going to be a crawl, walk, run. Let's just start with one segment within misinformation or one area of deep fake and just start working on the tech. And also, as I mentioned before, leveraging generative AI, leveraging open AI, ensuring it's additive to our technology, and then layering on human-based detection too, because it goes hand in hand. But the technology is moving really, really fast right now.
Shannon, there's another topic I want to move on to briefly. If I opened a newspaper like the Wall Street Journal a few decades ago, I might see an ad Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. I might notice it the first day, and then the next day I might ignore it or move on. In the digital world we inhabit today, how do you as a brand avoid doing that in case it either gets ignored or kind of irritates the consumer?
Frequency control is real. It's a real challenge, and I often say, I think we talked about this. Advertising, when done well, is a service to the consumer, and part of that service has to do with making sure that we're not following you around with the lamp that you already purchased or the light bulb that's already installed in your house and saying, "Hey, don't you still want this light bulb?" And I try to bring it back to my brands and any brand that I have the chance to talk to the real life consumer experience of that moment. If I walk into a store and I leave things in the cart and decide I don't want them, you don't chase me out into the parking lot saying, "Hey, didn't you want this? 50% off. Take it, take it, take it." You wouldn't do that to a person in real life. Why would you do that to them online? And so I do think there's a brand responsibility, and we need the media partners especially, to give us the opportunity to take those levels of controls and make sure that we're not over-frequencing you. That's not to say that frequency is a bad thing, because you might see it the first time, have a moment where you say, "This is interesting, but I'm not right for it right now." If I do come back to you 2 or 3 days later, you go, "You know what, it was really windy that day. Maybe having some hair clips in my bag is a good idea." And so you decide to add those to the cart and go ahead and purchase. So there's always that moment of making sure that we're not over-frequencing, but we're not ignoring either. And I do think we don't have this perfect as an industry yet for a couple of reasons. One, I don't think we've figured out properly, brand by brand, because I think it is truly brand by brand, what that right tipping point is and where over-frequency exists. We also haven't solved the cross-media measurement issue globally to make sure that we can get there. And I know the UK is working quite closely on this. The ANA, which I sit on the board of, is working quite closely on cross-media measurement. Those tools are the things that are going to help us better do this on behalf of consumers, but we have to get this right.
We've got time for one more question. Sam, I'm going to ask you. I figure you've been building these internal dashboards inside your business, figuring out where things work, where you get the best ROI, distinguishing between correlation and causation. As you kind of look forward over the next few years, right now we're in a space where the impact of a campaign can be measured within weeks. It used to be months. Does it get more and more dynamic, do you think?
Yes, but I think a lot of it is down to the data quality and the size of the organization. Reckitt, like similar to L'Oreal, is a big global company that's created a lot of silos within its organization. So therefore, there'll be people working on similar projects, having access to data that they don't share, and if they do try and share it, it isn't consistent in its naming conventions. The taxonomies are different, the definitions are different. So those are the types of things that I'm working on to really help us become more agile, more data-driven. And I think CPG companies, because we don't have the end relationship with the consumer in terms of purchase, there's only so much we can do. And until we move to D2C types of businesses, we won't be able to activate instantly like a lot of the small D2C players. But data quality, and I keep on saying to our marketing teams, it's not the most sexiest part of digital transformation, but it's the most crucial. If you don't have the right quality of data, the right governance, the right strategies to activate, and the right principles, it's not going to be useful to you. And like there's a stat that 80% of people now are concerned about data privacy. So that's one of the key things that we're working with our marketers. Like when you acquire data, do it through the lens of, is it ethical? Is it responsible? Can you use the data? Don't just go and get a number just because our competitors are quoting to their shareholders that they got 1 billion PII records. Those are the types of things that we're trying to look after our own strategy rather than compare ourselves to our peers.
We're at time. We're going to leave it there. Shannon, Blake, Samir, and Lisa, thank you so much. Really interesting.
Thank you.